I met Grant at a fundraiser for the Children's Hospital, where I worked as a pediatric oncology nurse. He was there representing his family's pharmaceutical distribution company, Halverson Medical Supply, third generation. Old money wrapped in new philanthropy. He asked intelligent questions about treatment protocols. He didn't flinch when I described what vincristine does to a child's nervous system, or how we prepare families for the possibility that their 8-year-old might not see 9. Most people at those events wanted the emotional satisfaction of charity without the clinical reality. Grant leaned in. We were married within 18 months. His family welcomed me with the kind of warmth that feels like acceptance until you realize its evaluation. His mother Priscilla hosted a lunch at their estate in Dunbar Heights. Just the women. His sister Mallory, his cousin Belinda, Priscilla, and me. They asked about my family. I told them the truth. My mother died when I was 12. My father remarried someone who made it clear I was a burden, and I put myself through nursing school with loans I was still paying off. Priscilla touched my hand. You've built yourself from nothing. That takes extraordinary strength. I felt grateful. I should have felt warned. Grant and I had our first son, Felix, 2 years into the marriage. I took 6 weeks of leave, then returned to the hospital. We needed my income. Grant's salary from the family company was generous, but not dynastic, and we were building our own life separate from family wealth. That was important to me. I didn't want to be kept. Priscilla offered to cover childcare. Family helps family, she said. I thanked her and declined. We found a daycare near the hospital. She smiled. Of course. You're very independent. The word sat strangely. When Felix was 18 months old, Grant's father had a stroke. Severe. The kind that reorganizes a family's future in 6 minutes of oxygen deprivation. Grant became interim CEO of Halverson Medical while his father underwent rehabilitation that everyone knew would never restore him to functional leadership. The salary increased. The hours increased more. I was covering night shifts to maintain my seniority at the hospital. Grant was traveling to medical conferences, supplier negotiations, regulatory meetings. Felix learned to say, "Daddy gone," before he learned to say, "I love you." We hired a nanny, Colette, a French woman in her 50s who had raised 4 children of her own. She was competent, warm, and completely uninterested in boundary violations. She respected our home as our space. Priscilla began dropping by unannounced. Just checking in, she'd say, holding shopping bags from boutiques I couldn't afford. Designer clothes for Felix, organic wooden toys that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. I thanked her. I asked her to call first. She looked hurt. I'm his grandmother. Grant said I was being sensitive. I was pregnant with our second son, Isaac, when Grant's father died. The funeral was massive. Politicians, hospital administrators, pharmaceutical executives. I was 6 months along, swollen and exhausted, standing beside Grant while he accepted condolences and corporate sympathies. Priscilla gripped my arm during the reception. You'll help him through this. Not a request, an assignment. Grant became permanent CEO. The board vote was unanimous. Family legacy, proven leadership during the transition period, deep relationships with suppliers and hospital systems. He was 34. I gave birth to Isaac 7 weeks later. Grant was in Tokyo for a medical device conference. He made it back 2 days after the delivery. He held Isaac, took photos, posted them on social media with a caption about blessing and legacy. Then he went back to work. I had 10 weeks of maternity leave. I spent them in a haze of nursing, sleep deprivation, and managing Felix's jealousy of his new brother. Colette helped where she could, but she had her own family obligations and couldn't work weekends. Priscilla offered again. Let me hire someone to support you full-time, someone who can be there whenever you need. I was so tired I almost said yes. but something stopped me. Maybe it was the way she said, "support you." Like I was fragile, like I needed management. I said we were fine. Grant said I was being proud. I returned to work after 10 weeks, 3 12-hour shifts per week. I pumped in the staff bathroom between patient rounds. I came home to Felix's tantrums and Isaac's colic and the particular loneliness of being married to someone who was always just about to leave for another airport. Grant's administrative assistant was a woman named Sylvia, mid-40s, divorced, meticulous. She managed his calendar like she was orchestrating a military campaign. She sent me polite emails when his schedule changed, dinner meetings running late, early flights requiring overnight departures. She signed them, "Best regards, Sylvia." I appreciated the communication. I didn't realize I was being trained to expect his absence. When Isaac was 8 months old, one of my colleagues at the hospital, a physician named Jared, mentioned he'd seen Grant at a restaurant in the city. "Didn't want to interrupt," Jared said casually. "Looked like a business dinner." I asked Grant about it later. He was packing for a trip to Atlanta. "Supplier negotiation," he said, not looking up from his suitcase. "Ran late." I asked who he was with. He paused. "Vendor reps. Why?" I said Jared mentioned seeing him. "Jared should mind his own business." He said it lightly, but his hand stopped moving. I let it go. That was my first mistake. 2 months later, Sylvia's emails changed tone, still professional but more detailed. "Grant will be staying overnight in Philadelphia due to early morning meeting with Hospital Procurement Board. Grant extending Chicago trip by 1 day to finalize contract terms with Midwest Medical Group." I started tracking the trips against his credit card statements. I had access, joint accounts, shared finances. I told myself I was just being organized. The hotel charges matched the city's. The restaurant charges were expensive but explainable. There were no obvious red flags, but there were Uber charges, late at night, to residential addresses. I searched the addresses. One was a high-rise apartment building in the city, 40 minutes from our home in the suburbs. I told myself it could be anything, a colleague's place, a business associate hosting a meeting. I didn't tell myself the truth. Felix started kindergarten that fall. Isaac was in daycare 3 days a week. I reduced my hospital shifts to part-time to manage pickups and drop-offs because Grant's schedule made it impossible for him to maintain consistent childcare responsibilities. My income dropped by 40%. Priscilla called it finding balance. I called it bleeding slowly. Grant suggested I take a leave of absence entirely. "We don't need the money," he said. "You're exhausted." I asked what I would do with myself. "Be present for the boys. Be present for me." I stayed at work. In November, I found a strand of long, dark hair on Grant's coat. My hair is blonde. Colette's hair is gray. Sylvia's hair is short and auburn. I held the hair between my fingers for a long time. Then I threw it away. I didn't ask him about it. I was afraid of what not asking would confirm. Instead, I started paying attention. Grant's phone was always face down, his laptop always closed. He showered immediately when he came home from trips, before hugging the boys, before sitting down, before letting me get close enough to smell anything that might cling to him. I started checking his coat pockets. I found nothing except business cards, breath mints, and receipts that told me nothing except that he ate well when he traveled. I felt insane. I felt like I was betraying him by suspecting him. I didn't feel like I was protecting myself. That was my second mistake. In January, I got sick. Not dramatically, just a persistent cough I couldn't shake, fatigue that felt heavier than normal sleep deprivation. Night sweats I blamed on hormones. I ignored it for 3 weeks. When I finally went to my doctor, she ordered a chest x-ray. The x-ray showed a mass. The CT scan showed lymph node involvement. The biopsy confirmed stage 3 Hodgkin's lymphoma. I was 32 years old. Grant was in Seattle when I got the diagnosis. I called him from the oncologist's parking lot. I was shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. He went silent for a long time. Then he said, "I'll be on the next flight." He wasn't. He came home 2 days later. He held me. He said all the right things. He called his mother, who arrived within an hour with a casserole and a tight smile that suggested my illness was an imposition on the family's schedule. I started chemotherapy the following week. A BVD protocol: adriamycin, bleomycin, vinblastine, dacarbazine, every 2 weeks. 6 months of treatment if scans showed response. I lost my hair by week 3. Felix asked why Mommy looked like a boy. Isaac, not yet 2, just stared at me with uncertain eyes. Grant hired additional help. A woman named April, who could cover overnight care when I was too sick to function. April was young, competent, warm with the children. She treated me with a deference that made me feel ancient. Priscilla began coordinating my care. She scheduled rides to treatment. She arranged meal deliveries. She showed up at the house with cleaning services I didn't request. I was too sick to argue. I should have been grateful. I should have questioned why she was so eager to manage my access to my own life. By March, I was barely functional. The chemo destroyed me. I couldn't work. I couldn't parent effectively. I spent days in bed, nauseous and weak, while April managed the boys and Priscilla managed everything else. Grant was traveling more, not less. I asked why. "The company can't stop because you're sick," he said. Not cruel, just factual. I asked if he could reduce his travel. "We've hired help. You're covered." I wanted to say I needed him, not coverage. I said nothing. In April, I was hospitalized for neutropenic fever, an infection my compromised immune system couldn't fight. I spent 5 days in isolation, receiving IV antibiotics. Grant visited once for 40 minutes between meetings. Priscilla visited daily. She brought magazines, lotions, soft blankets. She sat beside my bed and talked about the boys, what they were eating, how they were sleeping, funny things Felix said. She never once asked how I was. When I was discharged, Grant was in Denver. Priscilla picked me up from the hospital. She drove me home to a house that had been reorganized in my absence. The furniture rearranged, the boys' schedules posted on the refrigerator in someone else's handwriting. Colette had been let go. April was now full-time, living in our guest room. I asked who authorized that. "Grant thought it would be easier," Priscilla said. "You need rest, not stress." I stood in my own kitchen, feeling like a guest. That night, I tried to put Isaac to bed. He screamed for April. I sat on the floor outside his room and cried until I vomited. The next morning, Grant called from California. "I heard you had a hard night." I asked who told him. "Mom's keeping me updated. She's worried about you." I asked why she had access to details about my nights. He sighed. "She's trying to help." I said I didn't ask for her help. "You're not exactly in a position to refuse it." I hung up. I called my oncologist. I asked if my treatment was affecting my cognition, my perception, my ability to assess reality. She said no. She asked if I felt unsafe. I said I didn't know. She said that was an answer. I started keeping a notebook, small, spiral-bound, hidden in my nightstand. I wrote down dates, conversations, moments that felt wrong but that I couldn't quite articulate as problems. April started each day in our home at 7 a.m. She left at 8 p.m. She had keys. She had alarm codes. She knew where everything was. She called Priscilla Mrs. Halverson with a respect that suggested employment, not just assistance. I asked Grant who was paying April. "The family," he said. I asked which family account. He looked annoyed. "Does it matter?" It did. I pulled bank statements. Our joint checking showed no payments to April. I checked our savings. Nothing. I called the bank. I asked about other accounts under Grant's name. There were 3 I didn't know existed. I didn't have access to any of them. I sat with that information for 2 days. I didn't confront him. I was learning that confrontation achieved nothing except confirmation that I was being managed, not partnered. Instead, I started documenting. I photographed bank statements. I copied email exchanges with Grant about the boys, about my care, about household decisions I was no longer included in. I recorded the dates of his trips against his explanations for them. I didn't know what I was building. I just knew I needed proof that I existed because I was being erased in real time. In May, my scans showed response to treatment. The tumors were shrinking. My oncologist was optimistic. I had 2 more cycles of chemo, then radiation if margins were clear. Grant took me to dinner to celebrate. Expensive restaurant, private table. He ordered wine for himself. "You're going to beat this," he said. I asked if he believed that. He looked confused. "Of course." I asked if he'd still love me if I didn't. He reached across the table. "Don't talk like that." I pulled my hand back. "I'm asking." He didn't answer. 3 days later, I overheard April on the phone in the kitchen. I was upstairs, too weak to make it down quietly. She didn't know I was listening. "She's better," April said. "The scans were good. Mrs. Halverson says we'll need to transition soon." A pause. "I don't know. A few more weeks, maybe. She's still pretty dependent." Another pause, then a laugh. "No, he won't leave until everything's organized. He's very methodical." I stood at the top of the stairs. My legs felt distant. I went back to my room. I wrote down what I'd heard, word for word. I didn't know what it meant. I knew it meant something. I finished chemotherapy in late June. My hair was starting to grow back in fragile tufts. I was still weak, still nauseous from cumulative toxicity, but functional enough to start reclaiming pieces of my life. I asked April to reduce her hours. She looked uncomfortable. "I should check with Mr. Halverson." I said I was checking with her. She called Grant. He called me 20 minutes later. "April says you want to cut her hours." I said I wanted to parent my own children. "You're not strong enough yet." I asked who decided that. "Your doctors, my mother, everyone who actually cares about your recovery." I said I was deciding for myself. He was quiet for a moment, then, "We'll talk when I'm home." He was in Phoenix. He wouldn't be home for 4 days. I reduced April's hours myself. I told her to leave at 2 p.m. She looked panicked, but complied. Priscilla arrived at 2:30. "April called me," she said, walking into my house without knocking. "She's concerned." I said I was managing. "You're barely out of treatment. You need support." I said I needed space. She smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. "You're not thinking clearly." I told her to leave. She didn't. She walked to the kitchen, started preparing dinner, began reorganizing my refrigerator. She moved through my space like she owned it. I stood in the doorway watching her. I realized she thought she did. That night I logged into Grant's email. I'd never done it before, not out of trust, but out of some outdated notion of privacy. I knew his password. He'd given it to me years ago for something mundane and never changed it. I searched for April's name. There were dozens of emails, coordination with Priscilla about my care, discussions about the boys' schedules, updates on my condition, my mood, my movements. I was being monitored. I kept searching. I found an email thread from January, right after my diagnosis. Grant to Priscilla. "We need to ensure transition is smooth. I don't want the boys disrupted more than necessary." Priscilla's response: "April is excellent, very discreet. She understands the situation." Grant: "Good. Keep me updated on her stability. I need to know when to move forward." I read it 3 times. I didn't understand what move forward meant. I kept looking. I found emails about accounts I didn't have access to. Transfers of money from joint assets to accounts in Grant's name only. Not large amounts. Nothing that would trigger obvious alarm. Just steady, systematic reduction of my financial access. I found emails with Sylvia, professional on the surface, but threaded through them were details that suggested intimacy. Inside jokes, references to private conversations, a tone that went beyond administrative coordination. I found an email from April to Priscilla, forwarded to Grant. She asked about the accounts today. I told her everything was managed through family business. She seemed to accept it. Date, 3 weeks ago. I hadn't asked about accounts 3 weeks ago. I'd asked about them 2 days ago. April had reported a conversation that hadn't happened yet. She was following a script. I closed the laptop. I sat in the dark in Grant's office. My hands were shaking. I had cancer. I had 2 small children. I had no independent income. I had a husband who was systematically isolating me from my own life. I had no idea what he was planning, but I knew it required my dependence, and I knew I had to become undependent very, very quickly. I didn't sleep that night. I spent hours going through every document I could access: bank statements, tax returns, property records, insurance policies. Our house was in both our names, jointly owned. Except there was a refinance application from April, Grant's signature, a notary seal, my signature. I'd never signed it. I pulled out the original mortgage documents. I compared the signatures. They weren't even close. Someone had forged my name. I photographed everything. I uploaded it to a cloud account Grant didn't know existed, an old email address from before we were married that I'd kept active out of some instinct I hadn't understood until now. Then I started planning. First, I needed my own money. I opened a checking account at a different bank. Small deposits from the joint account, amounts small enough to look like regular spending, groceries, gas, household supplies. I withdrew cash at different ATMs and deposited it into the new account. $60 here, $80 there. Over 3 weeks, I accumulated $2,000 Grant didn't know about. Second, I needed documentation. I copied every financial record I could access. I photographed every email, every bank statement, every piece of evidence that showed systematic exclusion from marital assets. I created a spreadsheet tracking his travel against credit card charges, against the Uber rides to residential addresses. Patterns emerged. The same address in the city appeared 14 times over 8 months. Third, I needed witnesses. I started recording conversations. Not obviously, just my phone in my pocket, audio memo running. April talking to Priscilla about managing her expectations. Priscilla talking to Grant about the timeline. Grant talking to me like I was an obstacle to be managed rather than a partner to be consulted. Fourth, I needed a lawyer. I called 3 before I found one, who understood what I was describing. Her name was Nadine Radner. She specialized in financial abuse within marriages. Her website listed her credentials: 20 years of practice, former prosecutor, law review articles on coercive control. I made an appointment using my maiden name. I paid her consultation fee in cash. She listened to everything, reviewed everything I'd documented. She took notes without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "He's planning to leave you, but he's planning to make it look like you're unstable, incapable, and unsafe for the children." The medical crisis gave him perfect cover. He's been building a case that you're too compromised to function as a parent or financial partner. I asked why he would do that instead of just divorcing me. Because if you're deemed incapable, he can seek sole custody, control of marital assets, possibly even guardianship over you if he can make a medical argument he doesn't have to divorce you. He just has to make you irrelevant, And if you're irrelevant, you're not entitled to the same assets you'd get in a divorce. You'd get subsistence support, maybe supervised visitation, and he'd maintain control of everything else. I sat with that for a long time. Then I asked what I could do. She said, "You fight before he files anything. You establish your competence, your awareness, your capacity. You document his affair, his financial manipulation, his coordination with his mother to undermine your parental authority. And you do it quietly, because if he knows you're preparing, he'll accelerate." I asked how long I had. She looked at the emails I'd brought, particularly the ones mentioning timeline. "Based on this language, I'd say you have weeks, maybe a month. He's waiting for you to finish radiation. When you're at your weakest, that's when he'll move." I hired her that day. I paid her retainer in cash from my secret account, $1,500. That left me with $500 for emergencies. She gave me homework. "I need medical records showing you're competent, statements from your doctors, documentation of his affair, receipts, communications, anything concrete. And I need you to start preparing yourself emotionally because this is going to get very ugly very fast." I went home and made dinner for my children like nothing had changed. Grant came home that weekend. He was affectionate, kissed me, asked about my recovery, played with the boys. He seemed lighter than he'd been in months, happier. I asked if something good had happened at work. "Just feeling hopeful," he said. "Things are coming together." I smiled. I didn't believe him. That night, after he was asleep, I went through his phone. I'd never done that either. Another outdated notion of respect that felt absurd now. He had messages from Sylvia that went back 18 months. Not just professional coordination, intimate exchanges. "Missing you. Can't. Wait for Denver. Counting down the days. Denver." I searched his email on my laptop. I found a real estate listing, a property in Cherry Creek, expensive, contemporary, 4 bedrooms, under contract. Buyer, Grant Halverson. Closing date, August 15th. 6 weeks away. I looked at the photos. Floor-to-ceiling windows, gourmet kitchen, master suite with spa bathroom. Children's rooms decorated in blue and green. Felix and Isaac's favorite colors. I went to the bathroom and vomited until there was nothing left. Then I went back to my laptop and I kept searching. I found enrollment paperwork for a private school in Denver, Eastwood Academy. Application submitted for Felix, kindergarten, Isaac, preschool. Emergency contacts listed: Grant Halverson, Sylvia Kepler, Priscilla Halverson, not me. I found emails with a moving company. Dates coordinated around my radiation treatment schedule. Client will need discreet packing services between July 20th to August 1st. Wife will be undergoing daily radiation treatment and will not be present during midday hours. I found a message from Priscilla to Grant dated 3 days ago. "The timing is good. She'll be too weak from radiation to contest anything immediately. By the time she's functional, you'll be established in Denver and will have medical documentation supporting the custody argument." I found a reply from Grant. April has been documenting concerning behavior, memory issues, confusion, emotional volatility. Combined with the psychiatric evaluation from March, we'll have medical support for the argument if needed. I read that over and over. They were going to say I was crazy. They were going to say the cancer, the treatment, the stress had made me incompetent. They were going to take my children to Denver. They were going to leave me here with nothing. And they were going to tell everyone it was for my own good. I didn't cry. I just got colder. I forwarded everything to my secret email account. Every message, every document, every piece of evidence. Then I called Nadine's emergency line. It was 2 a.m. She answered on the 3rd ring. I told her what I'd found. She was silent for a moment. Then she said, "We need to file tomorrow. This is abduction planning. If he executes this, you'll lose the children before you even know what's happening. I asked what filing meant. Emergency custody motion, financial injunction, fraud charges for the forged signature on the refinance, restraining order preventing him from removing the children from the state. This goes to court immediately, and it's going to be a war. I asked what would happen to the boys during that process. They stay with you unless he can prove immediate danger. Based on what you've shown me, he can't. But he's going to try. He's going to put you on that stand and make you defend every moment of your illness, every emotional response to betrayal, every decision you've made. This will be brutal. I said I'd already survived brutal. Good, she said. Because this is worse. This is survival with an audience. I said I was ready. I wasn't. But I didn't have a choice. We filed on July 12th. Emergency motion for custody, restraining order, preventing removal of the children from the state. Injunction freezing marital assets. Fraud complaint regarding the forged refinance. Grant was served at his office by a process server at 11 a.m. He called me at 11:15. I was at home with the boys feeding them lunch. I let it go to voicemail. What the fuck did you do? His voice was tight, controlled, but barely. Call me back, now. I didn't. He called 6 more times. I blocked his number. At 1 p.m., Priscilla arrived at my door. She didn't knock. She used a key I didn't know she had. I heard the door open, heard her footsteps, found her standing in my kitchen while Isaac was in his high chair and Felix was coloring at the table. Boys, she said, smiling at them. Why don't you go play in the living room? Grandma needs to talk to your mother. I said the boys were staying. She looked at me. The smile disappeared. You've made a very serious mistake. I said she needed to leave. Those are my grandsons. You can't keep them from me. I said I could and would if she didn't leave immediately. She stepped closer. You're sick. You're confused. Grant has been nothing but supportive, and you're destroying your family out of paranoia. I held up my phone. I'm recording this. You entered my home without permission, using a key I didn't authorize you to have. You're in violation of the emergency order. Leave now, or I'm calling the police. Her face went rigid. You have no idea what you're dealing with. I said, neither do you. Leave. She looked at the boys. Felix had stopped coloring and was watching us with wide, worried eyes. This isn't over, she said. She left. I immediately called a locksmith. Had every lock in the house changed within 2 hours. Cost me $300 I couldn't spare, worth every penny. Grant came home that evening. His key didn't work. He pounded on the door. Open this door. I live here. I spoke through the door. You're served with a restraining order. You can't be here. This is my house. It's our house, and the court says you can't enter it. He was quiet for a moment, then, let me see my children. Supervised visitation only. Your lawyer has the details. You're going to regret this. His voice was different now, not angry, colder. You have no idea what you've started, I said. Neither do you. I heard him walk away. Felix was crying. Why is Daddy mad? I knelt down beside him. Daddy and I are having grown-up problems. It's not your fault. Is he coming back? I said I didn't know. Isaac started crying because Felix was crying. I held them both and tried not to shake. April arrived at 7 p.m. She had a suitcase. I opened the door but blocked her entry. Mrs. Halverson sent me to collect my things, she said. I said she could get them herself with supervision. She thinks it's better if I'm here, to help with the boys during this transition. I said there was no transition. She looked genuinely confused. But Mr. Halverson said I'd be coming to Denver to help set up the new house. I felt something cold in my chest. He told you that? He hired me specifically for the transition. Mrs. Halverson explained everything, that you were too sick to manage a move, that the boys would need consistency, that I'd be their primary caregiver in the new location while you recovered here. I asked when she was hired. February, right after your hospitalization. Before my scans showed I was responding to treatment, before they knew if I'd survive. They'd hired her to replace me while I was still fighting for my life. I said, "Get your things. You have 10 minutes, then you leave and you don't come back." She looked panicked. But Mrs. Halvorsen said, "I don't care what she said. This is my home, my children, and you're leaving." She did. When she was gone, I sat on the floor and I let myself fall apart for exactly 5 minutes. Then I got up, wiped my face, and I started preparing for war. The emergency hearing was scheduled for July 18th, 6 days away. Nadine prepared me like I was going on trial for murder. "They're going to attack everything," she said. "Your mental state, your physical capacity, your fitness as a parent. They're going to use your cancer against you in every way possible." She gave me a list of documents to obtain. Complete medical records from my oncologist, letters from my treatment team confirming cognitive capacity, statements from anyone who could testify to my competence and parental involvement. I spent the next 5 days gathering evidence. My oncologist, Dr. Holly Granger, wrote a detailed letter. Patient has demonstrated full cognitive capacity throughout treatment. Her emotional responses have been appropriate to extraordinary stressors. Her cancer treatment has not compromised her decision-making abilities or parental fitness. She's currently in remission and completing final radiation therapy as planned. My therapist, the one Nadine had referred me to when I first retained her, wrote a statement. Client demonstrates acute awareness of her circumstances, appropriate emotional regulation, and protective parental instincts. Her responses to documented deception and manipulation are rational and measured, not paranoid or delusional. Jared, my colleague from the hospital, agreed to provide a statement about seeing Grant with another woman at the restaurant months before my diagnosis. Colette, our former nanny, provided an affidavit. I was dismissed without explanation while Mrs. Halverson was undergoing chemotherapy. She did not authorize my dismissal and was visibly distressed when she discovered I'd been replaced. April was hired without Mrs. Halverson's knowledge or consent. I gathered every email exchange showing Grant's coordination with Priscilla to manage my life without my input. I gathered every bank statement showing financial exclusion. I gathered the forged refinance documents. I gathered the real estate contract for the Denver house, the school enrollment papers, the moving company correspondence. I assembled a timeline: diagnosis, systematic isolation, affair, financial manipulation, planned abduction. Nadine reviewed everything. "This is strong," she said. "But you need to understand, he's going to make this about your stability, not his misconduct. He's going to say everything he did was protective, not predatory. He's going to say you're twisting support into control because you're paranoid from the stress of illness." I asked how we counter that. "We show pattern, we show premeditation, we show that his actions began before you had any reason to be paranoid. We show that you were being erased while you were fighting to survive." The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Felix asking if Daddy was coming back. I kept thinking about Isaac screaming for April instead of me. I kept thinking about all the ways I'd ignored my instincts because I was afraid of being difficult, being paranoid, being the problem. At 3 a.m., I got up and read through everything one more time. The emails, the documents, the evidence of systematic betrayal. I wasn't crazy. I was awake, and I was done apologizing for it. July 18th arrived. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Fluorescent lights, wooden benches, a sense of mundane bureaucracy applied to the destruction of lives. Priscilla was in the front row, Mallory beside her, Belinda, the whole Halverson family closed ranks. Grant wore a navy suit. He looked tired, sympathetic. A man burdened by a sick wife and impossible choices. I wore gray, professional, understated. I'd put on weight since. Treatment ended. My face was less gaunt. My hair had grown back enough to style. I looked healthy. I looked capable. Grant's lawyer was a man named Victor Dunbar. Expensive suit, practiced sympathy. He opened by painting a picture of a man trying to support a desperately ill wife while maintaining a business and protecting his young children from chaos. Mr. Halverson has been nothing but supportive throughout his wife's medical crisis. He hired help. He coordinated care. He made difficult decisions to ensure his children's stability while their mother fought cancer. And now he's being punished for that support because his wife, understandably struggling with the trauma of her illness, has reinterpreted protection as persecution. Nadine stood. Your Honor, we're not here to debate Mr. Halverson's intentions. We're here because the evidence shows he used his wife's medical vulnerability to systematically exclude her from financial decisions, forge her signature on legal documents, plan relocation of their children to another state without her knowledge, and coordinate with his mother to monitor and document his wife's behavior for use in custody proceedings, all while conducting an extramarital affair. The judge looked at Grant. Mr. Halverson, did you purchase property in Denver? Victor started to speak. The judge held up a hand. I'm asking your client directly. Grant said, Yes, Your Honor. Did you inform your wife of this purchase? I plan to discuss it when. Yes or no, Mr. Halverson? No. Did you enroll your children in a Denver school? Tentatively, yes. Did your wife authorize or have knowledge of this enrollment? Pause. No. Did you coordinate the timing of your planned relocation with your wife's radiation treatment schedule? Grant looked at Victor. Victor whispered something. Grant said, I coordinated logistics around her treatment, yes. Meaning you planned to move while she was incapacitated by radiation therapy. I planned to minimize disruption to everyone involved. The judge made a note. We'll come back to that. He looked at me. Mrs. Halverson, are you currently capable of caring for your children? I stood. Yes, Your Honor. Are you in remission from your cancer? Yes, my most recent scans showed no evidence of disease. Do you have support systems in place for your ongoing recovery? I listed them. My oncology team, my therapist, a home care nurse for the final weeks of radiation recovery, my hospital colleagues. Do you want primary custody of your children? More than anything, Your Honor. He nodded. We'll hear from both parties. Mr. Dunbar, call your first witness. They started with the psychiatrist who'd evaluated me during treatment. Dr. Lionel Fairbanks, distinguished, authoritative. He testified about his evaluation in March, conducted, he said, at the request of my care team to assess whether I needed additional mental health support during cancer treatment. He'd diagnosed me with adjustment disorder with anxiety and depressed mood, recommended ongoing therapy. Under direct examination, Victor asked, Based on your evaluation, did Mrs. Halverson demonstrate concerning psychological symptoms? She demonstrated significant anxiety, hypervigilance regarding her husband's activities, and what I assessed as paranoid ideation related to feeling monitored or controlled. In your professional opinion, were these symptoms related to her cancer treatment? The cognitive effects of chemotherapy and the psychological trauma of a cancer diagnosis can certainly contribute to anxiety and altered perception. Did you have concerns about her ability to make sound decisions? I noted in my report that her judgment appeared compromised by her emotional state. Victor thanked him and sat down. Nadine stood for cross-examination. Dr. Fairbanks, who requested this evaluation? The family. Mr. Halverson's mother contacted my office. Not Mrs. Halverson's oncologist. No. Not Mrs. Halverson herself. No. Were you aware when you conducted this evaluation that Mr. Halverson was planning to relocate with the children to another state? I was not. Were you aware that he'd been conducting an extramarital affair? No. Were you aware that he'd systematically excluded Mrs. Halverson from financial decisions and forged her signature on a legal document? No. So when you assessed her as having paranoid ideation about being monitored and controlled, you had no knowledge that she was actually being monitored and controlled. Dr. Fairbanks hesitated. I assessed based on the information available to me at the time, which was information provided by the family that was actively deceiving her. I can't speak to. Doctor, if you'd known then what you know now, that Mr. Halverson was planning to take her children while she was undergoing radiation, that she was being monitored by hired help who reported to her mother-in-law that her signature had been forged, would you still assess her concerns as paranoid? Long pause. No, I would assess them as observant. Nadine let that sit. Nothing further. They called April next. She testified about her time in our home, described me as fragile, often confused, sometimes hostile to help. She said she'd documented concerning behaviors at Priscilla's request because we were all worried about her. Victor asked, "Can you give examples of these concerning behaviors?" She would forget conversations. She'd accuse Grant of things that didn't make sense. She seemed paranoid about his travel, about his family, about me. She'd get very emotional over small things. In your professional judgment as a caregiver, was she capable of managing the children's needs? Not without significant support. Nadine's cross-examination was brief. April, who paid your salary? Mrs. Priscilla Halverson. Not your client, Mrs. Halverson? No. Were you aware when you were hired that Mr. Halverson was planning to relocate to Denver? She glanced at Grant. Yes. Were you told you'd be relocating with the family? Yes. Were you told Mrs. Halverson would be joining the family in Denver? Pause. I was told she'd be remaining here for her recovery. So you were hired to replace her? I was hired to provide continuity for the children during a difficult transition. A transition that would remove them from their mother without her knowledge. April's voice got smaller. I thought it was in their best interest. Based on information from whom? Mrs. Halverson, the elder Mrs. Halverson. Not from Mrs. Halverson herself? No. Did you ever ask my client if she wanted you reporting her private moments to her mother-in-law? No. Did you participate in plans to relocate children from their mother while she was undergoing cancer treatment? I was told it was for the best. That's not what I asked. April looked miserable. Yes. They called Priscilla. She was composed, elegant. She testified about her deep concern for her grandchildren during such a traumatic time, her worry about my deteriorating mental state, her attempts to provide support that I'd rejected out of paranoia. I tried everything to help her, Priscilla said, her voice breaking perfectly. But she pushed me away. She pushed everyone away. I was terrified for those babies. Victor asked, did you coordinate care for your daughter-in-law out of concern for her well-being? Absolutely. Did you hire April to support the family? I did. Did you believe Mrs. Halverson was capable of managing her children's needs during her treatment? I believe she needed help. Did you support your son's difficult decision to consider relocation for the children's stability? I did. It broke my heart, but I believed it was necessary. Nadine stood for cross. Mrs. Halvorsen, you sent an email to your son stating, "The timing is good. She'll be too weak from radiation to contest anything." Can you explain what you meant by that? Priscilla's face went carefully neutral. I don't recall that email. Nadine pulled up the exhibit. May I refresh your memory? The judge nodded. Nadine read the email aloud. Priscilla said, I was referring to the timing being good for organizing additional care during her radiation treatments. By contest, you meant contest care arrangements? Yes. Not contest custody arrangements? I never said custody. Mrs. Halvorsen, did you use a key to enter my client's home after the restraining order was served? I used a key I'd had for years to check on my grandchildren. After being served with a court order prohibiting contact, I didn't think it applied to me. I'm their grandmother. Did my client ask you to leave? She was being irrational. Did she or did she not ask you to leave her home? Priscilla's jaw tightened. Yes. Did you leave? Eventually. Only after she threatened to call police. I was concerned about her mental state. Concerned enough to violate a court order. Priscilla didn't answer. Mrs. Halvorsen, do you believe your grandchildren belong with your family rather than with their mother? Victor objected. Relevance. The judge overruled. I'll allow it. Priscilla looked directly at me. I believe those boys are Halvorsens. They deserve a stable home. And you determined their mother, recovering from cancer, was unstable? I determined she was compromised. By illness you didn't have. By circumstances you helped create. Objection. Sustained. Rephrase counsel. Nadine moved on. Did you coordinate with your son to document Mrs. Halvorsen's behavior for use in custody proceedings? I coordinated care. Did that care include April reporting Mrs. Halvorsen's private conversations, movements, and emotional states to you? Pause. Yes. Without Mrs. Halvorsen's knowledge? Yes. Did you then relay this information to your son? Yes. For what purpose? To keep him informed about his wife's condition. Or to build a case against her? To protect my grandchildren from an unstable environment? Nadine looked at her for a long moment. No further questions. Grant testified last. He described a painful situation, a wife he loved suffering through terrible illness, while he tried to maintain their family and his business. He'd made difficult decisions. He'd relied on his mother's help. He'd considered relocation to Denver for work reasons and thought the change might benefit everyone after such trauma. Victor asked, Did you love your wife? I still love her. Did you want to support her through her illness? More than anything. Did you plan to take her children away from her? I planned to create stability for my children during an impossibly difficult time. I never intended to separate them from their mother permanently. I thought a temporary arrangement while she recovered would be best for everyone. Did you conduct an affair? Grant looked down. Yes. I'm not proud of it. The stress of her illness, the fear of losing her. I made a terrible mistake. Do you believe you're a good father? I try to be. Nadine stood for cross. She didn't ease into it. Mr. Halvorsen, when did your affair with Sylvia Kepler begin? About 2 years ago. Before your wife's cancer diagnosis? Yes. While she was pregnant with your second son. He shifted. Around that time. So for 2 years, you conducted a secret relationship while your wife raised your children and worked to support your family financially. It wasn't that simple. How long had you been planning to relocate to Denver? About 6 months. Which means you started planning in January. Approximately. The same month your wife was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer? Silence. Mr. Halverson, the diagnosis complicated things, but the Denver opportunity was separate. You purchased a 4-bedroom house while your wife was undergoing chemotherapy? Yes. You enrolled your children in school while she was hospitalized for neutropenic fever. I was planning ahead. You hired April specifically to replace your wife in Denver while she was too sick to notice. I hired help for my family. Did you tell your wife about any of these plans? I planned to discuss everything when she was stronger. When specifically? After you'd already moved the children? I didn't have an exact timeline. Mr. Halverson, you sent an email to your mother saying you needed to know when to move forward. Move forward with what? With the Denver transition. With removing your children from their mother while she was completing radiation treatment. With creating a stable environment for them. By taking them to another state without their mother's knowledge, enrolled in new schools, living with your mistress. Sylvia was my assistant. Your assistant you'd been sleeping with for 2 years. Your assistant who was relocating with you and your children. Did you plan to tell your wife before or after you left? Grant's composure cracked. I did what I thought was best for my children. By using their mother's cancer as an opportunity to erase her from their lives? That's not what I was doing. Then what were you doing, Mr. Halverson? He didn't answer. Nadine let the silence stretch. No further questions. The judge took a recess. When we returned, he ruled. I've reviewed the evidence extensively. What I see is a systematic and calculated plan to exploit Mrs. Halverson's medical vulnerability to relocate minor children to another state without maternal knowledge or consent, coordinated between Mr. Halverson and his mother, executed by paid help loyal to the family rather than to the children's mother, and justified post hoc as being in the children's best interest. Mrs. Halverson's medical team confirms she is cognitively intact and parentally capable. The psychiatric evaluation was conducted without full information and has been recontracted by subsequent evidence. Her concerns about being monitored, controlled, and deceived were not paranoid. They were accurate. Mr. Halverson's conduct, the affair, the financial exclusion, the forged signature, the planned relocation, demonstrates a pattern of deception that preceded and extended through his wife's cancer treatment. Primary physical custody is awarded to Mrs. Halverson. Mr. Halverson is granted supervised visitation every other weekend, pending completion of family therapy and demonstrated commitment to co-parenting. All marital assets remain frozen pending equitable distribution proceedings. The refinance fraud has been referred to the district attorney for criminal investigation. Mr. Halverson is ordered to pay child support, spousal support, and Mrs. Halverson's legal fees. The restraining order preventing removal of the children from the state remains in effect. Mrs. Priscilla Halverson is sanctioned for violating the emergency protective order. Any further contact with Mrs. Halverson or the minor children without explicit permission will result in contempt charges. He brought down his gavel. Grant left without looking at me. Priscilla stopped in the hallway. This isn't over, she said quietly. I said nothing. She walked away. I went home to my children. I should have felt victorious. I felt hunted. Because I knew Priscilla wasn't bluffing, and I knew Grant wouldn't accept this quietly. They were just getting started. So was I. The following week, Priscilla filed for grandparents' rights. Emergency petition for visitation, claiming the children were being alienated from their family. Nadine opposed it immediately. Grandparents' rights don't supersede parental authority, she told me, especially when the grandparent actively participated in planning to remove the children from their mother. The hearing was scheduled for August 10th. Meanwhile, Grant moved to Denver anyway, without the boys, without Sylvia. She'd quit when the affair became public record, according to company sources. He came back every other weekend for his supervised visits. 3 hours in a monitored room at a family services center. A social worker took notes while he played with Felix and Isaac like they were clients, not his children. The social worker's reports noted, "Father appears uncomfortable with unstructured play. Children seem confused by visitation arrangement. Younger child, Isaac, shows limited recognition of father. Older child, Felix, asks repeatedly when he's going home." After the third visit, Felix asked me why Daddy lived in a different place. I said Daddy made choices that meant he couldn't live with us anymore. "Did he choose to leave us?" 7 years, old and cutting right to the center of it. I said yes. "Why?" I said I didn't completely understand it myself. Felix was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I don't think I like him anymore. I didn't tell him that was okay. I didn't tell him it wasn't. I just held him." Isaac, only 4, processed differently. He started having nightmares, waking up screaming that bad people were taking him away. The pediatrician recommended play therapy. I added it to the schedule, Tuesdays after preschool. My life became a grid of appointments, therapy sessions, legal consultations, medical follow-ups. I was still completing radiation, now 5 weeks in, fatigue accumulating like sediment. But I showed up to everything. I documented everything. I was building a record that I was present, capable, relentless. The grandparents' rights hearing in August went exactly as Nadine predicted. Priscilla's lawyer argued that the children needed their extended family, that I was alienating them out of bitterness, that my illness had made me unable to see what was best for them. Nadine presented the emails, the coordination, the planned abduction, Priscilla's violation of the protective order. The judge denied the petition. Grandparents' rights exist to maintain important familial bonds, not to undermine parental authority. Mrs. Priscilla Halverson participated in actions directly harmful to the children's mother during a life-threatening illness. This court will not reward that conduct with guaranteed access to minor children. Priscilla hired a different lawyer. She appealed. Nadine said appeals rarely succeeded but could drag on for months. I said I'd deal with it. I was getting good at dealing with things. In September, the district attorney charged Grant with forgery and fraud regarding the refinance documents. Felony charges. If convicted, he faced up to 3 years. His lawyer immediately filed a motion to dismiss, argued that it was a civil matter, not criminal, that marital partners often sign for each other, that there was no intent to defraud a third party. The DA's office pushed back. Intent to defraud is evident in the timing. Documents filed while the victim was incapacitated by cancer treatment, specifically to exclude her from equity in a marital asset before planned relocation and potential divorce proceedings. The case was assigned to trial for November. Priscilla funded Grant's defense, 6-figure legal team. They filed motion after motion, suppress evidence, dismiss charges, delay proceedings, standard defense tactics. Nadine told me not to get my hopes up about conviction. "Rich men rarely go to jail for financial crimes," she said. "But the public record matters. Every filing, every motion, every piece of evidence becomes permanent documentation of what he did." I said I understood. I started radiation in late July, finished mid-September. 25 sessions, 5 days a week for 5 weeks. The burns weren't as bad as I'd feared, but the cumulative fatigue was crushing. I'd come home from treatment, sleep for 3 hours, wake up to make dinner for the boys, then collapse again. Felix learned to pour his own cereal for breakfast. Isaac learned that Mommy needed quiet time. They were adapting. I hated that they had to. My follow-up scans in late September showed no evidence of disease. Complete remission. The oncologist was pleased. "Your response has been excellent. You'll need scans every 3 months for the first year, every 6 months after that, but your prognosis is very good. I should have felt relief. I felt nothing except determination to stay alive long enough to see this through. October brought the full custody trial, 5 days of proceedings. Both sides presented comprehensive cases. Grant's team focused on my ongoing instability, the stress of legal proceedings, my continued hostility toward his family, my refusal to facilitate his relationship with the children. They presented Felix's therapist's notes about his confusion regarding his father. They argued I was alienating the children. Nadine countered with the visitation report showing Grant's discomfort, and the children's confusion stemmed from his absence and choices, not my interference. She presented my medical records showing full recovery and cognitive capacity. She presented financial records showing I'd maintained stable employment, housing, and childcare despite everything. She presented character witnesses, colleagues from the hospital, the boys' teachers, neighbors who testified to my competence and engagement. The judge ruled in my favor. Primary custody confirmed. Grant's visitation expanded to unsupervised every other weekend, but only locally. No overnight visits in Denver until he demonstrated consistent presence. The Denver house was ordered sold with proceeds split equitably. Marital assets would be divided 50-50 despite his attempts to hide them. I was awarded full attorney's fees, over $60,000 that I'd paid from my savings and small account. Grant's lawyer asked for a stay pending appeal. Denied. Grant moved back to the area, rented an apartment 30 minutes away, started making the drive for weekend visitation. Felix tolerated it. Isaac cried every time. I documented both. In November, Grant's criminal trial began. I testified about discovering the forged signature, about being in chemotherapy when the document was filed, about having no knowledge of the refinance until I'd investigated our finances during his planned abandonment. Grant's lawyer cross-examined aggressively. Isn't it true you often asked your husband to handle financial paperwork because you were too tired from treatment? I said no. Isn't it possible you signed this document and forgot due to chemo brain? I said I never signed it, and the signature analysis proved that. Isn't it true you're only pursuing these charges out of vindictiveness? I said I was pursuing them because he committed fraud. The handwriting expert testified that the signatures didn't match. Different pressure, different letter formation, different baseline. The notary testified she'd never met me. She'd notarized Grant's signature only. Someone else had forged the notary seal for my signature. That was a separate crime. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on the forgery charge, guilty on the fraud charge. Sentencing set for January. Grant's lawyer immediately filed for appeal and requested bail pending appeal. Granted. He walked out of the courthouse. I went home to my children. December was quiet. Grant's visitation continued. The boys were adjusting, or at least becoming numb to the routine. Felix joined a soccer team, made friends, started to seem lighter. Isaac still had nightmares, but less frequently. I returned to work full-time at the hospital. My colleagues welcomed me back like I'd never left. They knew everything. Small hospital, impossible secrets. But they didn't pity me. They just gave me the hardest cases because they knew I could handle them. Pediatric oncology felt different now. I'd been on the other side. I knew what the parents were feeling, the terror, the helplessness, the surreal dissociation of advocating for your child while your body betrays you. I was better at my job because I'd survived. Wesley and I were still seeing each other, slowly, carefully. He'd met the boys a few times, always casual, never positioned as significant. Felix liked him. Isaac was wary. Wesley didn't push. He just showed up, consistently, without drama. It was startling how novel that felt. Priscilla's appeal of the grandparents' rights denial was rejected in late December. Final. She sent one last letter, delivered by her lawyer to Nadine's office. It said, "You've stolen my grandchildren. You've destroyed my son. You've weaponized your illness to manipulate the courts. I hope you're satisfied with yourself." I didn't respond. Nadine filed it with everything else: documentation, evidence, proof that I hadn't imagined any of it. January arrived. Grant's sentencing hearing was scheduled for January 15th. The prosecution recommended 3 years suspended to 18 months with probation. The defense argued for probation only. First offense, family man, successful businessman, already suffered reputational and financial consequences. I was allowed to make a victim impact statement. I stood in front of the judge, and I told him what it felt like to discover your husband forged your signature while you were fighting for your life. What it felt like to realize the person you trusted most was building an escape plan using your cancer as cover. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just told the truth. The judge sentenced Grant to 18 months in prison, suspended to 90 days with 3 years probation. Conditions included continued payment of child support and spousal support, completion of parenting classes, and prohibition from leaving the state without court permission. Grant served 60 days. He was released in March. By then, Felix had stopped asking about him. Isaac didn't remember him clearly anymore. Grant resumed visitation in April. Every other weekend, he showed up consistently, but the damage was permanent. My sons knew their father had chosen to leave. They knew he'd planned to take them away from me. They knew because Felix remembered and because I'd never lied to them about what happened. I'd simply told them age-appropriate truth. Daddy made choices that hurt our family. We're safe now. We're together now. That's what matters. It's May now. I'm writing this from my kitchen table in the house I bought with my half of the marital assets. Small, close to the city, with a yard big enough for the boys to play in. I've been cancer-free for 20 months. I go to therapy every week. The boys go every other week. Wesley's still around. We're taking it slow. I don't know if I'll ever fully trust anyone again, but I'm trying. Felix is finishing 2nd grade. He's smart, sensitive, watchful. He asks hard questions and expects honest answers. Isaac is in kindergarten. He's sillier, more resilient in some ways. The trauma sits differently in him. They're okay. I'm okay. But I'm changed. I don't forgive easily anymore. I don't trust authority by default. I don't assume good intentions. I don't make myself smaller to accommodate people who want me to disappear. I survived cancer. I survived a husband who used my cancer as an opportunity. I survived a legal system that wanted me to be grateful for partial justice. I survived all of it by refusing to be erased. Grant calls sometimes, asks how the boys are, makes polite conversation. I keep it brief. Priscilla sent a birthday card to Felix last month. I let him open it. He read it, shrugged, and threw it away. "I don't really know her," he said. I didn't correct him. Some family isn't worth preserving. Last week, Felix asked me if I was glad I got sick. I said no, of course not. "But would you still know about Daddy if you didn't get sick?" I thought about that. Probably not. So in a way, being sick saved us? 7 years old and connecting dots I'm still processing. I said, "Being sick showed me the truth. Fighting back saved us?" He nodded, went back to his homework, just like that. Processing trauma like it's a math problem. I don't know if that's healthy or terrifying, maybe both. I'm 35 years old, I have 2 children, I have a job I love, I have a body that betrayed me and then survived anyway. I have a history that tried to erase me and failed. I'm still angry. I don't think that's wrong. Anger isn't a flaw. Anger is information. It tells me what I won't tolerate anymore. It tells me what I'm willing to fight for. It tells me I'm still here. Still alive, still refusing to disappear, even when everyone wanted me to, especially then.